Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
You've
Thank you, Sneha.
inspired an entire generation of entrepreneurs. So we're really happy to have you here. And thank you so much for accepting this award. It's actually an honor for us that you agreed to accept this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this award. Yeah.
Sir, in the book Harsh Realities,
Yeah.
Professor Charan observes that, Ramcharan observes that, Harsh has an eye for big change. And we've seen that in last 5 to 10 years, there has been a sea change in how businesses are run.
Yeah.
So how do you envisage a future for Marico from now, given the kind of changes that we are undergoing?
See, Sneha, until 5 years back, our sector was supposed to be one of the most defensive sectors. And nothing could impact the sector because there were huge entry barriers in terms of distribution. If you wanted to succeed in FMCG, you needed a huge distribution network. You needed big money to advertise, to launch new products. So we saw very few startups entering this category. And we thought that there were 5 or 6 Indian companies and there are maybe 8, 10 multinationals in this space. So we are having good time in the sense that we always thought nothing will happen to us. But in the last 5 years, the discontinuities which is impacted this sector are huge. Initially, we started seeing disruption in the area of distribution. So initially starting to sell to wholesalers and retailers, we saw the emergence of modern trade. And today, modern trade contributes to about 15 to 20% of the turnover. And then we started seeing disruption through e-commerce. So today it contributes, depending on the company, about 8 to 10% of turnover. So almost 25–30% of turnover of FMCG companies is now being contributed by these 2 new channels. And they require a different approach. And all of a sudden, the financials for the traditional distribution network have got impacted. So distributors' ROI have got impacted. Many of the small retailers who have not changed themselves, they are seeing a big impact in terms of turnover reducing. And when that happens, then it impacts FMCG companies also. So we've had to relook at the complete distribution network. So the number of distributors have got realigned. And it's a huge exercise nationally to have a distribution network which is far more agile. And the chances, the way you approach e-commerce and modern trade is very, very different compared to the traditional distribution network. So you need a different kind of organizational structure to manage that. On top of that, we saw the emergence of D2C brands, which have happened in the last 4 or 5 years. And all the other entry barriers in terms of distribution or advertising got substantially reduced. And in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen huge number of players entering D2C space, which is good. At one level, it is good from a consumer point of view. Now, there are 2 ways of looking at it from an FMCG angle. One is it's a threat. Let me protect my business from this threat. Another is to say that, okay, let me look at it from an opportunistic lens. So what we have done in Marico is to look at it from both threat as well as opportunities. And in the last 3 years, we have acquired 4 D2C brands. We started with Beardo, then we had Just Herbs, then we had True Elements, and lately we acquired another brand, Plex, which is nutraceuticals. And on top of that, we had 2 of our own brands. Now, these brands require a very different approach in managing, and you can't have the traditional way of managing an FMCG business, managing the D2C brands. You need to move very, very fast. You have limited budgets as against big budgets in FMCG. So from day one, we said that this has to be managed differently. So we put them in a different office, a different team, much younger, and we did not want the FMCG mindset to impact the D2C mindset. And I must say that's worked out well. Initially, all the promoters who sold to us, they wanted to manage the company, have an upside over a period of 3 or 4 or 5 years. So we gave them that freedom. If we had not given them that freedom, we would not have been able to acquire. So when you acquire, you have to be flexible. And as on today, we have got 2 brands which have now completely come to us, and the other 2 will come over next 2 years or so. But it's worked out well, and we are far more, shall I say, profit sensitive compared to the D2C brands which have been funded from outside. So we see ourselves, I think the target is over the next few years, our D2C business also should make similar margins as our FMCG business. And we see that happening in the next few years.
Right. And as we've seen, it takes a lifetime to build, such a business. How are you going to ensure that your legacy stays on or is protected?
So I think for any business to be in perpetuity, and I'm that kind of mindset that I would like the company to continue irrespective of whether I'm there or not. I think you need 3 strong pillars. What is the purpose of the organization? What does the organization stand for? What is the strategy of the organization? How clear it is in terms of which areas to go, how to create a strong right to win, and how to succeed in the marketplace. And number 3, what is the culture and the talent piece? What culture will you require to succeed in the marketplace? Culture is not an end by itself. It has to have a very strong fit with the strategy. So these are the 3 pillars. They have to be very, very sharply defined. And then there have to be custodians who can monitor these pillars. So in our case, today, me and my family, and on top of that, the board of directors are custodians of these 3 pillars. And we go on monitoring these 3 things on a regular basis. And tomorrow, even if I am not there, I'm sure the company will go on looking at these 3 pillars to ensure that it continues from a long-term point of view. Because now the company is professionally managed. There is not a single family member who is involved in day-to-day management. So our role has shifted. My role earlier was promoter-managed company. Now it's more like a strategic investor-driven company.
Right. And there are so many startup founders in the audience, and you have always spoken about the need for governance. And if you have to tell the founders of today the 3 pillars on which they can really build stronger governance standards in their companies, what would that be?
So first of all, I started speaking on governance, I don't know, long time back, maybe 3-4 years back, much before all these recent companies which took some shortcuts have got very, very badly impacted in the marketplace. And I always believe that the governance has to start from day one, the time you start business, because many entrepreneurs think that I will look at governance when I grow up. But if you start taking shortcuts, you are sowing a culture of taking shortcuts within the organization. And that culture will continue with you when you become larger. So it's very important to attack governance from day one. And for me, governance is just not compliances. Of course, compliance is the most important part of governance, but it goes much beyond that. You have to create a culture and values which reinforce governance. And I think that's very, very important. Whenever there is a conflict between the organization's interest and any stakeholder interest, whether it is promoter, key employees, the organization's interest has to come first. For example, I had stepped down. I had not thought that I would step down at that age, about 10 years back. But I wore the cap of, okay, what is good for the organization? And considering that, I stepped down, and it's worked out well. And the same thing happens many times. We have talent which have played a very critical role in the organization's journey, very valuable at some stage. But as the business increases, as the complexity goes up, that same talent is not able to live up to the challenge. And many entrepreneurs feel that they have added so much value, we have to be loyal to them. My answer has always been, is it good for the organization? If it is not good for the organization, you should not do that. And multiple times I have asked some key talents to leave. it's worked out well because if you don't ask them to leave, the good talent will leave and the bad talent will remain. And you have to do it in a humane manner. You have to give that person a chance. Ensure that financially that person is not suffering. I have another thumb rule that if I have to do it in such a way that if after a few years, if there is an occasion in that person's family, I should get invited. So do it well, do it in a humane manner, but you have to do it in the organization's interest. And the third thing I want to say is that I think today the whole subject of governance has gone up. Now it's much more than just compliances. Things like organizations have to have very strong policy for and ensure that there is code of conduct, whistleblower mechanisms are flourishing in the organization. People should not shy away from blowing the whistle. Even things like diversity, inclusion play a very, very important role. So to me, governance is a far, shall I say, a wider subject than just compliances. But all I can say to entrepreneurs is that you have to take governance very, very seriously from day one and not when you just become bigger.
Right. And, when we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, we are also talking about the kind of capital that is available for them. And a lot of these businesses are backed by investors. So, would you call it bad parenting? Because it is probably the investors who are, also driving a lot of...
No, I think all investors are not same, I can tell you. Because I'm involved with some, shall I say, PE firms and some investors. And I can see a huge spectrum of the behavioral shift they can bring. And there are, I can definitely say there are very good investors, there are very good PE and equity firms. And you should select, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to select the right PE firm to back you, Because there are very good ones, and some of them may not be good, but that's okay, They look at a short-term point of view in terms of driving results and not looking at anything else. But there are many other organizations which look at long-term interests of the organization governance, and you can easily find them. There are many of them.
Right. One last question, and we can open the floor for audience questions. So you've been championing the cause of mental health, at a time when there are stalwarts who talk about 70 hours a week of, work schedule. What is your one advice for work-life balance that you would give to...
So the 70 hours has stirred up a lot of, shall I say, debate. I myself went public in my own social media and said that for Mr. Narayan Murthy it was easy to say because he had huge rewards if he worked for 70 hours. You have to ensure that every person in the organization is motivated to work 70. Just by saying that you have to work 70 hours is not going to make it happen. Because 70 hours in a city like Bombay means actually, including commuting time, it means much more. Because in Bombay, on an average, one person spends 1.5 hours per day commuting. So it's 1.5 into 6 days into 4 weeks, 25. So 40 hours go, so 70 becomes 110. Yeah. It's very tough to stay on a perpetual basis, go on working like that. Of course, there are some short-term challenges, fine. But if you're building a business which has huge rewards, for entrepreneurs, it may be okay to say that I'll work for 70 hours. But to expect each and every person within the organization to work for 70 is not fair, first of all. And even if you want, I know there's a big debate about work-life balance. To some extent, it's exaggerated, and many youngsters want to give more importance to work-life balance. To me, you should enjoy doing work. The moment you enjoy doing work, you will not have questions of balancing work and life because both are equal.
Right. Enjoy your work. That's one message Mr. Mariwala wants to spread. So if anyone from the audience has a question, yeah, Amit. Can we get a mic to Amit, please?
It's always great to listen to you. Always learn something new whenever I've heard you. One question I had, as you take a step back, a lot of it is about getting the right talent, CEOs, CXOs, and it's a circular loop. Founders' comfort is a function of how good they are, and vice versa. Sometimes if they don't work out, founders tend to come back in the business, which is not perceived well on the governance, but there's also the emotional affinity, if not the financial interest the founder carries. The question I had for you is, what are a couple of qualities, which are often undervalued as you think about hiring a leader, which often people ignore, but they are magical when you see well-performing leaders in the organization?
See, when I recruit people and when I interview people, I think 2 or 3 qualities I look for them. The first thing is that burning desire to succeed. You have to be a self-starter. I don't like calling people to motivational workshops and you have one workshop and people get motivated. To me, it has to come from within because each person goes through setbacks. Every person in this world has setbacks. But if you have that burning desire to succeed, you learn from that setback, you will try harder next time. So you have to be a self-starter. To me, that's the most important thing I look out for an individual. Number 2, we have a very strong culture. So I try to recruit people who fit into that culture. For example, somebody who is autocratic will not be able to stay in the culture. So we look at the leadership styles. It has to be participative. It has to be people-oriented. And then, of course, normally when I interview people, I like to give them a live case study, which is some challenge we are facing in the business and get their views, because then their ability to zero in on the exact issue and resolve it is very, very important. I think at senior levels, I think that ability to just pinpoint what to do in a certain situation is a very, very important quality, because if you are able to zone into that issue, then I think you will be able to move it forward.
Self-starters. Yeah.
Hello. So, sir, my question is, how do you foresee global ambition of Indian companies? I can see Marico has also been going international.
Oh.
But
talking of Indian company or FMCG company? Let's be.
FMCG, we can get into that curation. But also, I want to understand about the Marico's aspiration for future in terms of international business.
Okay, I think the second one is easier for me to answer. Currently, about 25% of our turnover comes from international business. So about 2,500 comes from international business. Our presence is mainly in Bangladesh. We are, I think, the largest Indian company in Bangladesh, doing a turnover of about 1,000 crores or so. We are very active in the Middle East and Egypt, very active in Vietnam, in South Africa. And I think for us to succeed in the international business, you need to have a very strong right to win. How will you succeed? We have a very strong presence in hair oils in India. Unfortunately, hair oiling habit has gone down globally quite a lot. So to leverage hair oils is difficult. So we have actually, in other markets like Egypt, we acquired 2 brands in what we call pre and post-wash hair care. In Vietnam, we acquired male grooming brand. So our growth will come from acquisition, and lately we've seen that coconut has become a superfood, and we have a big presence in coconut. So we are now actually leveraging that coconut equity to develop personal care products based on the equity and the goodness of coconut in other markets. And our first target is Africa, and we've seen good results in African markets. But over a period of time, we want to now grow to other countries, apart from the 4 or 5 big countries where we are present. So international will also get equal kind of a thrust. Overall, I would say if I had to look at FMCG companies, I think each of us, the big companies, whether it's Dabur or Godrej or us, has a fairly good presence in international markets. But we don't have any global brand. And I think that's a big challenge for Indian companies. Can we create a global brand? But for that, you need a very, very strong right to win. So you need a very big differentiator, because this FMCG is heavily crowded with very long players who have been there for long, whether it's Levers or Procter & Gamble or L'Oreal. And to succeed against them in their range of products is going to be difficult for Indian companies. So to make a global brand to me, is a big, big challenge, and I hope that some Indian company makes it big by creating a big global brand.
Okay, quite a few people over there. Lady over there.
Good evening, sir. My name is Muskan Kasmani, and I work as a wealth manager at IFL Securities. My question to you is, I believe you started working at the age of 20.
Yeah.
I am 23 and I'm just starting new in my career. So with this new era of people doing business, with content creation coming into the picture and the side hustle and the way people are earning money through social media, I want to know your opinion as to, do you see that as a sustainable career path, or does still 9 to 5 holds significant value?
No, I didn't understand the question for that. One is to what extent one should use social media. Is that the question? No.
Social media viable?
My question is, does content creation still holds value as a sustainable career, or side hustle culture is still a thing?
Frankly, I'm not able to answer that question. Sorry, I'm not an expert on this subject.
No problem, sir.
No.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. I am Bharat Mehta from Modern Capital. What I wanted to know, you have created a world brands like Marico, and congratulations for that. When we can create like patents or intellectual property rights like Facebook, Amazon, and Google's, when we can see, and what are the challenges the Indian companies have been facing as on today? Do we require a lot of R&D and government support to see that we also be on international platforms and create a world-class brands?
I think every company requires some development R&D, that for sure. But in FMCG, I don't think many of us are working. We have some patents, but I don't think that's the only route to success, because our technology dependence is not as high as many other sectors.
Right. On that note, we'll end this session. Thank you so much, Mr. Mariwala.